Thank you so much, Makosini, for your time this evening.
Me.
We'll get to these strategies in a moment, and we've just heard the way the president is celebrating this victory and highlighting how they got there and the expectations. But overall, when you look at the results, did anything surprise you?
Look, it didn't surprise me necessarily. There was always going to be a real alignment of sorts after the departure of former President Jacob Zuma. You'll remember that, towards the end of his presidency, he could galvanize opposition parties against the ANC. And most political parties, I think, shaped their strategies around him. And they were chasing his departure, Zuma must go and all that. And when he left, it had the effect of, when dogs are chasing a car, and the car stops and the dogs don't know what to do. So there was always going to be a realignment of sorts, and there were always going to be losers and winners as a result.
All right, and talking about that then, when you look at the way that the opposition political parties dealt with the fact that the person that they had been campaigning, using as their campaign strategy for such a long time, was now out of the way, why is it that they were unable to then change strategy, particularly for this election?
You have a president who is very difficult to make that stick on him, right? With former President Zuma, there were always allegations, scandals that you could use against him. Let's look at the scandals, or maybe allegations linking the current president. You have that 500,000 rands, that was a donation to his campaign. If you understand how ANC campaigns work, it's plausible that he couldn't have known about it. Right, so you can't really pin it on him, right? And then there's the money that was paid to his son, who is an adult, doing his own business, doesn't need his father's permission to do that. So again, there's a tenuous link, but you can't pin it on him. So when you really get desperate, you must now pull the Marikana card. Also, that doesn't help you because the commission did not make an adverse finding on him to the extent that maybe he should have been prosecuted, etc. And then you look at the time that he's been in office. No scandal, nothing. It's just a guy who gets the job done the way he does. Not charismatic, not terribly charismatic, but has a crossover appeal.
Surely they should have been able to find a way to make it stick that he was there during the last term of the previous president, that he was in office, he was his deputy. I found it interesting that they couldn't quite make that stick.
This is why it became difficult to do that, right? He was deputy president, again, no scandal on him, scandal on the other guy, but not on him. And when he runs for the presidency of the ANC, he runs on an anti-corruption platform, anti-state capture platform, anti-impunity platform. So he wins over the ANC base, the supporters of the ANC. He wins them over. And he wins at Nasrec. He becomes president. He continues with that. The appointment of the NPA national director, the constitution allows him to appoint whoever is qualified that he chooses, and he opens the process up. All the institutions that are supposed to fight corruption, he strengthens them. Now, what are you going to say about that? Because even if you look at the former apartheid government, it took one of the conservatives, F.W. de Klerk, to reform. So people who understand politics understand that reformers always, most of the time, they come from within. It's not somebody from outside. So his association with the Zuma administration could not, dampen what people could see for themselves that he was doing.
All right, let's look at the internal dynamics of the other top two parties. Let's start with the Democratic Alliance. They seemed to walk into this almost like it was a three-legged race. They hobbled themselves so close to an election.
The Democratic Alliance has a serious problem, and sometimes I think it may very well be an existential crisis. You have three strands in the Democratic Alliance. You've got the first strand, I'm not going to attach labels. You've got the first strand of people who think that it's okay to minimize the legacy and effects of apartheid and colonialism, right? And when they do that, they appeal to the base of the DA. The base of the DA likes that. right? And then you have liberals who will say, maybe not use labels, and then you have another strand that will say, we don't like what was happening with apartheid, but we don't like this BEE nonsense also. We don't like this. There is no white privilege. My parents worked hard for me to be here. I studied hard and did. They deny anything that has got to do with white privilege, and that the legacy of apartheid actually was about making life easier for white people and more difficult for black people. So the third strand, you have that of, I think that's where Mmusi Maimane and the likes of Phumzile Van Dam would belong, who say, but there has to be some form of transformation. There has to be some form of leveling of playing fields. Now, if you look at a party that has a membership or a voter base, a base that can be stolen by the Freedom Front Plus, and the same party trying to appeal to black voters, that is a problem. That's something that you cannot... Mmusi Maimane was always going to have a difficult job. And I hear people saying he may lose his job. I think if the DA were to do that, it would be a grave mistake, because the DA does not have a Mmusi Maimane problem. Mmusi Maimane has a DA problem. Right? And I don't know if they can find somebody who can have that crossover appeal that Maimane has.
That he has.
Unless if they have decided that since Jacob Zuma is gone, we can no longer beat the ANC. Let's go back to our base. Let's satisfy our base. In that case, you don't need a black leader. You can always get James Self to beat the DA.
Haven't they already lost that battle, seeing as they've lost quite a bit of their base to the Freedom Front Plus this time around?
Yes, they've lost the base to the Freedom Front Plus, which is why their numbers have gone down, and they're not making much, progress with black voters. So, hence, I'm saying they've got an existential crisis. They have to go back to the drawing board, sit down, and decide where they want to go strategically as a party, because strategically, really, they are on the right, as it were, but trying to get people from the left to vote for them. People are not going to vote for a party that they see as a party that fights for rights of the haves when they are the have-nots.
Okay. Let's very quickly deal with the economic freedom fighters. They did very well compared to 2014.
You know, I think the EFF could have done better if it had better PR, okay? Of late, the EFF, I think they are reading from a rule book of how to alienate people and lose friends, right? If you look at their posture on social media, you look at their leaders, always they are talking, when they're talking, they're throwing insults. And when you do that, and you still want people to vote for you, and you offend people everywhere, and the EFF strategy seems to be, let's grow our base. We don't care about the independents. We don't care about the floating voters. Let's grow our base. And that's what they're doing. And you can see they're growing it. And they are becoming opposition in some of the provinces. It is a growing party, but I believe it could have grown much faster.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank
you
so
very much
for your time today, PR strategist Makhosini Mkitjwa.